Hi everyone, I'm Tess and I'm here with Sally Rippin. Hi Sally.
Yeah.
Sally, in this video we are going to be talking about creating characters, but first we have a question from fan Quinn.
Hi Sally, I'm Quinn. Is Billie B and Jack based on people or did you just make them up?
Good question, Quinn. So Sally, are Billie B and Jack people you know, or did you just make them up?
Well, I would say that every author, ideas for stories come from two places. They would either be from your imagination. We've talked a lot about imagination already, but the other place they come from is your experience. And I would say every story you've ever written is a mixture of those two things, the author's imagination and their experience. And I think it's when you draw on your own experience that your stories really come alive. And that's where you create characters that feel real because you're using emotions and experiences that you've had before. So, for example, I think you have a copy of Beautiful Haircut in front of you. This is just one example of where I took something I remember I did when I was quite young and turned it into a story. So I used to have very long hair, but unlike Billie B. Brown, not only did I cut off my pigtails, I also cut off my little sister's pigtails. Do you think my mum was happy with me? It was a pretty silly thing I remember doing at 6. But that's what I do is I remember something that I did when I was growing up. And then I think, okay, how can I turn that into a story about maybe something that Billie would do? And that's where nearly all of my stories come from, things I remember doing when I was growing up.
Right. There you go. You heard it first. Sally Rippin cut off her pigtails and her sister's pigtails. My goodness. Sally, the Billie B and Pauline Buster books are packed with moments where the characters have really, really strong emotions, strong feelings. So anger, love, frustration, hyperactivity. Can you read us a little about one of your characters who has big feelings?
Sure. So when I was coming up with these characters, I decided that they would be best friends. So Polly is a witch and she has trouble doing spells. And Buster, I decided would be a feelings monster. And I thought, what would be a really interesting way of showing feelings? Because most of the time our feelings happen deep inside, and sometimes we can't find the words to express them, or sometimes they come out in weird ways. And so I thought I would write a story about a monster who has very, very strong feelings. And you'll see what happens when his feelings come about. So I'm going to start here in the story where Polly's had a really terrible day. She comes home from school, she dumps her school bag in the kitchen, kicks off her shoes, runs out into the backyard to look for her best friend. Because of course, if you've had a bad day, you need to talk about it with someone who cares. So this is how she calls out to her best friend. Aroo! Aroo! This is their secret call. Today, when Buster swings up into the tree, Polly sees he is wearing his favorite red jumpsuit. It's a bit squeezy now that Buster has become so big and hairy, but it has lots of pockets. Buster fills his pockets with treasures for Polly to admire. Buster tips out his pockets onto the branch. Today he has stones and sticks and 3 glass marbles. Then he digs his fingers even deeper and pulls out 5 sticky jam cakes covered in pocket fluff. Ta-da! He says, grinning widely, his moss green fur glowing pink with pride. Afternoon tea. Polly smiles. Thanks, Buster, she says, as cheerily as she can manage. She loves Buster's jam cakes, even if they're covered in pocket fluff, but she doesn't feel hungry today. Polly sits and watches her dearest friend shove one jam cake after another into his big, wet mouth. Eventually, Buster notices that Polly isn't eating. What's the matter? He asks, spraying crumbs all over her. Oops, sorry, he says. He tries to wipe the crumbs off her face with his big paws, but ends up smearing her cheeks with jam. I mean, he says, swallowing a lump of jam cake. What's the matter, Polly? You okay? You haven't touched your afternoon tea. Polly stares off into the distance. I messed up in spells today, she says sadly. Again. Buster stops chewing. Oh, he says, looking concerned. What happened? He presses his finger down onto a blob of jam on his fur and sneaks it into his mouth. Polly sighs. I exploded a toad. Oh, Buster says again. He pauses, not quite sure what to say next. Were you supposed to explode the toad? No, Polly says. Of course not. I was supposed to get rid of its warts, but I accidentally exploded it instead. Buster watches Polly carefully. She can see that he's wondering whether it's okay to laugh. Polly tries to keep her mouth still, but a smile twitches at the corner of her lips. Buster lets out a hoot. You exploded a toad, he splutters. That's hilarious. Polly frowns. Not funny, Buster, she says. Mallory Halliway laughed at me, and then I got mad and threw wart potion at her face, and Boris and Walter got some on their legs too. And now my mother will have to pay for new school pants for them, and Miss Spinnaker made me stay behind and clean up the whole classroom. It was the worst day ever. Oh, says Buster. His face falls. That's bad. That's really bad. He immediately shrinks in size. When Buster feels happy, he gets bigger and brighter. When he is sad, he becomes small and grey. When Buster feels Polly's feelings, he becomes almost the same size as her. Polly thinks this is the sign of a true friend.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us, Sally. That's beautiful.
Okay.
I think everyone needs a Buster in their lives.
And I think one of the things that I like the most about reading, Tess, you might know about this feeling as well, as it helps you understand what it's like to be someone else. And I think that's my favorite word, is this word empathy, where reading helps you allow to feel like what it's like to be in someone else's skin or someone else's fur. And so I think that's what I tried to show in this book, is about how we create empathy and how we feel for other people.
Well, what a beautiful character, a feelings monster that shrinks when he's feeling sad and gets bigger when he's feeling happy. So, Sally, you're so good at creating amazing characters. Could you help us create an amazing character?
Sure. Now, remember how I said in some of the earlier ones that you never get your story or your drawings right, first of all. So I always start by doing little sketches in a notebook. And this is a very, very first picture I did of Polly and Buster a long time ago when I was just dreaming up these characters. You can see it's just a little pencil sketch, and they've changed a lot. And then what I might do is I might then start doing some other drawings in a sketchbook. And so this is another drawing I did of Polly and Buster, where you can see once again they've changed a lot. And so I think the most important thing is not to feel like you have to rush it, or you really have to come up with something great straight away. So just drawing or writing ideas down, and they grow just like a feelings monster until they start to fill up your whole imagination.
So, Sally, what would be the first step to us creating an amazing character?
Well, that's when you can go deep into your imagination, but you can also look at the things around you. Remember, stories come from a mixture of those two things, imagination and experience. So maybe you want to start by looking at the people in your world. So maybe the friends that you have or people in your family, and then add some imagination into it. So maybe you have a very, very tall father, but you could make him super tall like a giant. Or maybe you have a very annoying little brother that you could turn into kind of a little monster that just trails around and nips at your ankles all the time. So you can be inspired by the people around you and come up with great ideas, and then add lots of imagination in there to come up with good characters.
Oh, I love that idea of taking people that you know and then thinking about the types of people they are and then creating them into slightly magical creatures. Well, that's a challenge for everyone who's watching. Who do you know? Who's in your life Could you create them into some kind of magical creatures? What kind of writing could you put with that? Maybe you could use some adjectives, some describing words to show your person that you know who's suddenly grown into a magical other being. Sally, thank you so much for coming on Story Talks. My brain is absolutely fizzing with new ideas. It was wonderful to learn about how you love to create stories. And I hope you watching, I hope your brain is fizzing too. Well, that's it for Story Talks, and I'd like to wish everybody happy storytelling. Bye-bye.